Is a pojagi seam the same as a French seam? This is a question I get asked a lot. Welcome to Epida Studio. My name is Elizabeth and I help you make beautiful things with quilting, pojagi, and embroidery. So almost every time I speak to a group and I talk about pojagi patchwork, the question comes up, is a pojagi seam a French seam? Now, it's not exactly a French seam, but that is a really good question because they are quite similar. Both of those seams are stitched twice, and both of those seams have all the raw edges hidden away inside. But here is just a little example. This is a piece that is stitched with the French seam, so we can see that the seam is finished. There are no raw edges exposed, but from the front it looks just like a regular piece thing. You can't tell that it's a French seam, and it does have a clear right and wrong side because this side doesn't have the seam, this side has the seam allowance in it. So that is a French seam. A pojagi seam in Western sewing is technically called a flat felled seam. And so this is a seam that you can see when I look at the fabric, it is flat. There is no seam allowance kind of sticking out separate. And so on both sides, it has a smooth, flat finish. And so if you want to see how to do this seam, I have a lot of tutorials about how to do this seam. The reason why I call it a pojagi seam instead of a flat fell seam is because when I'm using it for patchwork, it was in traditional Korean sewing that it was first used in patchwork, and so I use that term just to honor and respect that that is the source of where it came from. I've never seen in any other place this seam used widely for patchwork. So if you know of any other culture where this was used widely for patchwork, I would love to hear about that because I'm always trying to learn new things. But as far as I've been able to discover up to now, Korean traditional sewing is the only place that used this seam widely for patchwork. Now, just to make this a little bit more confusing, this seam, which I sew on machine, it is based on the traditional Korean seam of samsol. And I apologize for my accent and how I'm pronouncing it, but S-S-A-M-S-O-L, samsol. And so this is the flat seam. There is another traditional Korean seam, and it is called tongsol, and that actually is a French seam. So a French seam also were used in traditional Korean sewing. But this is the one that I use when I do pojagi patchwork by machine, and this is not a French seam. So hopefully that clears things up a bit for you. If you have any more questions or you want to learn more about pojagi patchwork, then I have lots of tutorials for techniques and projects. I have patterns and courses, and you can find all that on my website, epidastudio.com.